Okay, Alexander, we have to do a follow-up as to what's happening in Ethiopia. And this is an interesting story. It's a very complicated story too, I think. The interesting part about it is that in the Tigray region, we do have a military triumph from the Tigray Defense Forces over the Ethiopian army. So in what is effectively a civil war, you could describe it as a civil war, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
absolutely.
you have the Tigray forces shocking the army of the government, and they shock them with such speed and efficiency that you have to have a Security Council meeting on this issue, and for the first time, we're seeing the United Nations and the Security Council having to try to figure out a way to stop the fighting and to keep Ethiopia whole. And the way it's looking now is that all the momentum is with the Tigray forces, and there's talk that they have the capability and the military know-how to keep on advancing. What do you make of this story?
Well, first of all, let's just talk about these military events. Now, of course, it's always very patchy, but the reports that we're seeing, and they're not being contradicted in any authoritative place, are that up to half the Ethiopian army may have been destroyed in Tigray province. That is a huge debacle. I mean, some say up to 5 divisions. That there was this Tigrayan counterattack, and it was decisive and overwhelming, and that the Ethiopian army has virtually collapsed. And the Ethiopian government, which launched this offensive into Tigray, is now calling for a ceasefire and negotiations. But the leaders of the Tigray movement are showing no interest in doing it. Now, it seems to me that there are 2 possible ways forward. One is that Tigray declares itself independent of Ethiopia. Now, this has been talked about. It seems there's a lot of people in Tigray who support that. If that happens, it could very well start a process whereby the whole of Ethiopia starts to disintegrate. It's a patchwork of many ethnicities and many nationalities. It's not impossible. And of course, that would be the breakup of the oldest historic state in Africa, a country with an enormously long and very rich history. But of course, it's something which has happened before in Ethiopian history. So the breakup of the country is by no means impossible. It's a real possibility. The second possibility is that the Tigrayans will repeat what they did once before. And this was that for a very long time, Ethiopia was dominated by the Amhara group, which is centered on the capital, Addis Ababa. This is the group that supported the previous emperor, Haile Selassie. And when he was overthrown, the military dictatorship known as the Derg, led by an officer called Mengistu Haile Mariam, which replaced him. But eventually, that dictatorship, that military dictatorship in Addis Ababa, was defeated by a group that came out of Tigray and which marched down to Addis Ababa and formed a new government there. And it's not impossible that that might repeat itself and that the Tigrayans might march onto Addis Ababa and might try to recreate themselves as the government of the entirety of Ethiopia. Whether that's possible, whether they would be accepted by the other Ethiopian ethnicities, I don't know. But that has to be a possibility. So that's a choice. There is, in theory, the third possibility, which is the one the diplomats are talking about in the UN Security Council and elsewhere, which is that some kind of power-sharing government is created or some sort of new government is created. The great problem with that is that there is no trust now between the leadership in Tigray and Prime Minister Abiy in Addis Ababa, the Prime Minister who launched this war. And we can't be certain that such a thing is possible and workable. So we just don't know whether diplomatic initiative can succeed. And it hasn't helped that the diplomats of the various great powers have not really been in contact with the Tigrayan leaders at all. So we simply don't know whether that kind of negotiation is achievable and whether they would be interested in it. Why would the Tigrayans want to share power with Abiy, the Prime Minister of Ethiopia, when they have so comprehensively defeated his army? It's something I'm not able to see myself. And if it's true, as many claim, that the Ethiopian troops in Tigray committed many atrocities, then of course that will have hardened feelings in Tigray against them even more.
Yeah, it already seems like the Ethiopian government is structured in a power sharing type of way with Ethiopia and Eritrea. So I mean, it seems like it would be very difficult to cobble together some sort of power sharing, an additional power sharing type of government. And once again, like you said, Alexander, the speed and the decisiveness of the Tigrayans' victory from the reports that we're getting, to me, would suggest that they don't have a need to negotiate or to stop, for that matter. But you know, we'll see what the Security Council comes up with, and if the Security Council can even make a difference. This is from an article from Responsible Statecraft, and I'll read you a couple of paragraphs which I think summarize the tragic mistakes that the Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy made, which led to this debacle and this victory for the Tigrayan forces. Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and his coalition partner, Eritrean President Isaias Afwerki, seemed to believe they could grind the Tigrayan populace into submission by sheer cruelty. Rarely can a policy of war crimes, the Tigrayans call it genocide, have backfired so spectacularly. The Tigrayans had nothing to lose and fought for their lives. Among those who took up arms were people who didn't support the TPLF, but rallied to fight for survival. This was Abiy Ahmed's first folly. He also overestimated his military skills and believed in his own propaganda, apparently thinking that one more push would finish the job. After the TDF had annihilated 5 full army divisions on June 22nd, Abiy ordered 3 more divisions into the same trap. They met the same fate. In numerical terms, the Ethiopian army has lost about half its forces. In fighting capacity, it is destroyed. So that confirms what you reported as well in our first segment.
Yeah.
It is destroyed, this article says. Once again, these are the reports that we're getting. So what do you make of those comments, and how the president and the prime minister handled this conflict?
Well, they disastrously mishandled this conflict. I mean, I think the point to make is that Prime Minister Abiy is from another community, another ethnicity within Ethiopia, the Oromo, and he seems to have had some kind of feelings that he needed to assert himself against the Ethiopian government which he inherited, the Ethiopian power structure which he inherited, which was partly Tigrayan dominated, because, as I said, it arose out of that previous Tigrayan victory against the former dictatorship, the Derg, which had been dominated by an entirely separate ethnic group, the Amhara. So he seems to have wanted to break with the Tigrayans and to sort of put the Tigrayans in their place. He upset the balance of structures within this rather fragile kaleidoscope mosaic of a country. He launched this war in Tigray, wildly overestimating the capabilities of the Ethiopian army, and also he tried, it seems, as this article says, to use extreme violence in order to intimidate people. And what he did instead was that he provoked the Tigrayan population to rise up, and with the Tigrayans already accustomed to bearing arms, as I said, they defeated the previous Ethiopian government of the military dictatorship, the Derg. He just wasn't able to put together a military force which could defeat them, and he compounded that by making many very bad decisions, which suggest that he really isn't competent to lead Ethiopia in any shape or form. So perhaps the best thing that needs to be done, the first thing that needs to be done, if anything is to be put together, patched together, is that he has to go, because he has clearly and visibly failed, and failed in the worst and most disastrous way. He launched a war in which all kinds of atrocities were committed and which failed in its objective. And as a result, the very stability of the country that he leads is now coming under pressure. So he has to go, and we'll see if something else can be put in his place, and whether that can be done diplomatically, or whether instead it has to be done by some other armed force, or whether Ethiopia can hold together at all. If you know Ethiopian history at all, and it was a subject that I did interest myself in many years ago, admittedly, but you know, the thing about Ethiopia is that you have long periods of relative stability when a very powerful ruler manages both, you know, through war, but also through diplomacy and skill to pull the country together, to bring the various ethnic groups together, to ally with the church, which is an immensely strong force in Ethiopia. And it's important to say that both the Tigrayans and the Amhara people, for example, believe in the same form of Christianity. But anyway, a strong leader, someone like Menelik II in the 19th century, can bring it all together, establish a state, create stability, and then weaker leaders allow this thing to slip out of control. It all breaks down. There is a period of civil war and instability until eventually a new leader comes along and pulls it all together again. So we could be seeing that reversion to instability now happening. But of course, those previous periods of instability took place in the pre-modern world. One worries for the Ethiopian people's sake that if their state now does indeed collapse, then we could very well see a humanitarian crisis as well, which of course Ethiopia has experienced many, and that would be a catastrophe on a huge scale. But it is Prime Minister Abiy's mistakes which have led Ethiopia to this point, and it's a real tragedy because a few years ago the country seemed to be doing well, its economy was growing fast, and it seemed as if it was on the brink of a breakthrough which would put its problems behind it. But through foolishness and small-mindedness and inability to work with people and a propensity to violence and authoritarian methods, he's put all that in jeopardy and has led his nation to disaster. So the first thing that needs to be done is that he must go.
Yeah, so the United States is even pushing for a ceasefire, and the United Nations Security Council is going to try to put some leverage on the Tigrayans, but I don't think they have much to work with, if you want my honest opinion.
No,
Can the UN do something here? The last paragraph of the article from Responsible Statement says the United Nations should send a high-level envoy to Mekelle, which is the capital of the Tigray region, to meet with the Tigrayan leadership and listen to their demands. The world needs to do business with the TPLF, TDF, not just Tigray, but Ethiopia depends on them. So that paragraph is basically summing it up. You have to, at this stage, Alexander, you have to have the United Nations Security Council sit down at a table along with Ethiopia with the Tigrayan leadership. Otherwise, you're going the route of a multi-ethnic state, forming. One region secedes. I imagine the process then begins for many regions to secede.
Exactly, that's exactly what will happen, and that is the essential thing that needs to be done. Obviously, there has to be diplomacy, but there hasn't been much diplomacy up to now because the country which has been the dominant political force in this part of the world, the dominant great power, which has been the United States, has up to now dealt only with the Ethiopian government, which has been its main ally in East Africa. So now that that's failing, they need to change their policies, and they need to change them fast. Not just or primarily in their own geostrategic interests, but in the interests of the stability of the region and of the best for the Ethiopian people too. Now we will see whether there is that ability to negotiate and to carry out proper negotiations and proper statesmanship in this part of the world. I don't know that there is. They're leaving it very dangerously late, but at least if we can try something now, well, who knows? Something might succeed. But though I don't think a decision on outright secession in Tigray has yet been made, if they don't do something to patch something together very soon with all the terrible consequences we've just talked about, then that decision may be made with disaster in East Africa, in Ethiopia, to add to all the other many disasters we see around the world. So, diplomacy needs to start, and it needs to start now.
All right, we'll be following this story. Guys, look for us on Locals. You'll find the link down below to join our Locals community, where you can share your stories as to what's going on in the world to the entire community on Locals. You'll find a link down below to that. Go to the Duran shop, 10% off when you use the code Real News. 10% off all mugs, hats, shirts, everything. You'll find that link down below. And of course, look for all our channels on BitChute, ODYSEE, Rumble, and the free speech video platform Super U. You will find those links down below as well. Take care, everybody.